I went to TooManyGames at the end of June, and I had a fantastic time. A bunch of my friends went, 2 friends I spent most of the day with on Friday and Saturday. Some other friends were there too that I was able to catch up with over the course of the weekend. I bonded with one specific vendor who I'll talk about in episode 2. And speaking of episode 2, we have to split this video up into 2 parts because I bought too many games at TooManyGames. So today's episode is going to be all games that I got from not one specific vendor, and then episode 2 will be all games that I got from that vendor specifically. So today's episode is going to be predominantly non-Japanese games, and episode 2 will be entirely Japanese games, but I'll give more of an update when we get there. But one other cool part to TooManyGames was that I cosplayed for the first time. I cosplayed as an Ape Escape Monkey, which I didn't think too many people were going to recognize, but I underestimated the power of the gamer, and a lot of people stopped to take pictures with me, took pictures of me, so that was really cool to have a little bit of attention that way. So having never done that before, I think I'll do that again at some point. But let's get into the games, because there's a lot of games. But before we get into the games, we got to talk about the one thing in this video that I got that is not a game, and I also did not pay for. So this is The Wings of Reen Volume 3. So I went to a panel called Weird Video Game Consoles, which I also went to last year. Last year the theme was handheld consoles that were obscure, and this time the guy who hosted Weird Video Game Consoles did weird consoles that were released by companies that we are already very familiar with. So for example, Nintendo, Sega, there's even a Casio system on there, which is kind of funny. So I got a trivia question right because I knew the successor to the Sega Pico, which is obviously the Pico Bina. So my prize for getting that question right was this Volume 3. So Wings of Reen is originally a novel series from 1983 that ran tangent to another series called Aura Battler Dunbine, and it's more or less about a guy who's just on the run from the U.S. Army, which is kind of bizarre, but also kind of funny. But what's interesting is that this is the 3rd volume of 3 of the anime. So this contains episodes 5 and 6 out of 6 total episodes, each that are 30 minutes. So I'm surprised that this was put into 3 separate volumes instead of just like a 2-disc complete collection. I don't know, maybe there's some Wings of Reen fans out there, but yeah, just kind of cool to get because I won it as a trivia question. So that's the only non-game thing we're showing. Everything else I got over the course of the weekend was a game. Everything else I paid for was a game. I didn't even pay for that one, but it was still cool to show off. So we're going to go back in time. We're going to start with Switch games and work our way back to a Super Nintendo game at the very end that I'm actually really excited to talk about. But we're going to start with Switch. So all the Switch games that I got are all releases from like independent publishers, so non-Nintendo games, non-other big publishers on the Nintendo Switch. So a lot of them are kind of obscure, kind of indie releases, if you will. So I don't have a lot to say about all them, but also we got a lot of games to get through, and I don't want to talk about this all day long, so we're going to get through it, just give a nice little brief overview of each one. So the first one comes from Premium Edition Games, which is like a limited release publisher, and I strongly recommend going to see them. I discovered them 2 years ago at my first TooManyGames, my first convention, bought a couple games there, and I've been keeping up with their releases ever since. I think they only have about 15, 16 Switch releases, so definitely go check them out if it seems of interest to you. But one of the ones that I was missing was Demon's Tier Plus, which is a 2020 roguelike RPG with procedurally generated dungeons. And yeah, this was the 3rd Switch release in the Premium Edition line, and the 3rd to last one that I was missing. So I'm only missing 2 more. I'm missing Phoenotopia Awakening and Raji from Premium Edition. Raji's a pretty recent one, but Phoenotopia Awakening is a little while ago, I guess. But those are the only 2 I'm missing, and then I'll have a mostly complete Premium Edition line of releases. So that's pretty cool. Kind of cool. Go check them out. They're good guys there. So yeah, it's another game to add to the collection. The next one comes from a similar limited release publisher. This one is basically European limited run. This is Super Rare Games. This game specifically I bought from Just Press Play because they got a bunch of Super Rare releases, a bunch of limited run releases, but the game is Little Gator Game, which is a 2022 adventure game where you play as this little gator guy. I don't know if it's hiding behind Super Rare's packaging, this like big over sleeve. It's got like a sticker and a card in the back, which is why it's all enclosed like this. But yeah, this is adorable. It was, I think, Nintendo Life that previously said it was reminiscent of like Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. This little gator guy is even dressed up as like Link, I think, in a sense. So it's adorable. Strongly recommend going to check it out if you just like little gators, you like cute games, you like Legend of Zelda. That's pretty cool. So like I said, this comes from Super Rare, bought from Just Press Play, which is a retail company in Pennsylvania. And they actually did 2 more releases that I also have. One is Abzu, which is an underwater game. Another is Grapple Dog, which I think I got at last TooManyGames. So just 2 more cool games to get. They're in Europe, so I don't want to pay to get them shipped here. But still pretty cool. So the next handful of Switch games, the next 9 Switch games, right? 9, 4, 8. I lied, 8. The next 8 Switch games all come from a store called Video Games New York in New York. And their entire deal is that they will publish games for like indie games, so which is pretty cool. But they also get a ton of really, really obscure releases, a lot of releases for games in Europe. So there's a handful of games here that are European. They have European rating labels, games that come from Asia, not necessarily Japan, as well as games that come from Japan. So games from all over the place, games you probably haven't heard of, or maybe you've heard of it. You can find a lot of them like on Steam, for example. So pretty cool. And the first one we're going to talk about is Aviary Attorney Definitive Edition, which is a 2015 adventure game that's a lot like the Ace Attorney series, where you are investigating with the goal of defending your clients. You play as Monsieur J.J. Falcon, no pun intended, or pun intended, I guess, in terms of bird speak, who defends clients and brings peace in 1848 France. So speaking of 1848 France, you can kind of tell from the artwork, it's very, very 19th century Europe centric, if you will. And the music fits the bill just the same. So it's very interesting to see a game made like this, because this is super unique for the time. And it was released in 2015 but brought to Switch in 2020. So kind of a funny title, but a cool game to go along with it, and definitely one that I'm sure somebody out there would recommend. But definitely a cool game to add to the collection because it's very bizarre. Next one is a bundle pack of Demetrios, A Big Cynical Adventure, and Project Xenon Valkyrie Plus. So we'll start with Demetrios. It's a 2016 point-and-click where a stone tablet was stolen from an antique dealer who I think was drunk, and the dealer has to go find it, and in the process also learns about its sister tablets. And it was brought to Switch in 2018. That's about as much as I could say about that one specific game. The other game, Xenon Valkyrie Plus, is a 2017 roguelike platformer RPG with randomly generated worlds where you fight to the deepest part of a moon to defeat a witch. Yeah. It's kind of interesting. When I was researching for this game, this one specifically, Premium Edition's Demon's Tier Plus listing references Xenon Valkyrie Plus. So that's kind of weird that these games are like a little connected, if a little similar. But this one was brought to Switch in 2018. So this bundle pack of a game that was released in 2018, 2019, was released in 2020, which I didn't know that each one was released separately, but I guess I got the bundle pack to play both. Next one is an interesting one because it was released only this year. It's like brand new. It was released in February, and this is Dream Cutter. So it's a side-scroller where you have a scythe known as the Dream Cutter, and you play as a protagonist, Haley. As you travel through her mind and her nightmares, you slice through the nightmares, and you're with your friend Lucia. So kind of interesting. It's kind of lauded for its storytelling and its themes that go along with it. Probably a little mature, but still very interesting. But it's very cool that it was released only this year and has a physical release so quickly for a game that is obviously not a Nintendo stronghold. So pretty cool, kind of interesting, and yeah, Dream Cutter. Next one, another game I don't need to say a lot about. This is Idle Manager, which is a 2021 business sim where you run a talent agency and you have to navigate through the ups and downs of your clients causing PR disasters. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty straightforward that you would be somebody's manager and you have to take care of them, take care of your clients. So not much I need to say about that, but idol manager. Next one is one that I thought I had recognized, but I guess it was kind of a Mandela effect. This is the fantabulous edition of The Many Pieces of Mr. Coup. So I thought this little guy here was something I had recognized. I don't. Maybe he reminds me of somebody that I can't put my finger on. But yeah, The Many Pieces of Mr. Coup. It's a 2022 point-and-click adventure that is just all around absurd. The story is absurd. The humor is absurd. This guy, even if I don't recognize him from something, is absurd himself, if a little funny. So kind of a weird release. I can't say much about it because there wasn't much more info about it besides the fact it was a point and click. So if Mr. Coup has any weight in anything else, please let me know, because I did not recognize this thing at all. So yeah, The Many Pieces of Mr. Coup. Next one is the Namcot collection, not the Namco collection, but it's a 2020 compilation, also known as Namco Museum Archives, that just has updates, quality of life improvements, saving abilities for just classic Famicom and NES games, some of which we've actually talked about in the past. So prior to 1995, Namco was known as Namcot, so that's the title, Namcot collection. This specifically, I don't remember if this was an Asian release or a Japanese release specifically. I think it was an Asian release. But we didn't get this here in North America, at least not physically. I can't remember if we got it digitally or not. But it has just tons of classic games. On the back it has Pac-Man, Galaga, Tower of Druaga, Pac-Man Championship Edition, which is another one, and a couple others. I think another release of this had Galaxian and Galaga, just as two other ones. So, famous arcade games, famous games overall. Cool to get them in one nice, centralized, better way to play them edition in the Namcot collection. Next one, kind of funny, is Sir Lovelot, which I think it's kind of self-explanatory in terms of why I found interest in it. The name is pretty interesting. It's a 2021 adventure platformer with the only goal being to collect gifts so that you could woo damsels. So with the name, the artwork, the premise, which matches completely, just had to be a game that I had to pick up. So kind of funny, Sir Lovelot. And the last Switch game is kind of an interesting one too. This is White Knight, which was originally released in 2015, and it's some combo of a survival, puzzle, and horror game with very distinct art and music styles. So you see that the front is completely in black and white, and the whole game is in black and white with a matching music style, which is pretty cool. You play as a guy who was in a car crash and magically appears in this abandoned Vesper mansion, and yeah, it kind of tracks, makes a lot of sense for a game that is a survival/horror game. The game was brought to Switch in 2018, so this has been around quite some time. I don't know if this physical release, I don't remember when this one was from. It doesn't even say on the back. Yeah, I don't know. But cool to get this one, kind of interesting. So, White Knight. So, that brings the end to the Switch. Like I said, we're going to go back in time. We're going to go, backwards in terms of console order. So the next one, not nearly as prevalent a system, but at least this one was released in North America. So the next game is on the PlayStation Vita, and it's a series we've talked about. It is Shiren the Wanderer, the Tower of Fortune, and the Dice of Fate. So I got this one from a random vendor. Just happened to find it, got a good deal on it. But we've talked about Shiren the Wanderer on this channel before. Both a very charming history for roguelike, for the roguelike genre, I should say. Super interesting. My goal is to collect every game, and since I don't have a Vita, I don't have a way to play it, so this was kind of on the back burner. For some reason, I thought it was way more expensive than it was, but like I said, I got a pretty good deal on it. So this game was originally released on the DS in 2010, but was expanded and re-released for this Vita edition in 2015, and you play as Shiren as you climb, get this, a tower, the Tower of Fortune, and you fight the ruler of fate and the Dice of Fate. So yeah, no big deal having to face the ruler of fate. No stress at all, no pressure. But this game was also again released on Switch in 2020 by Limited Run Games. And when I was researching, I was like, I wonder if I have that game. And I checked, and I magically have the game on Switch. So I don't remember when I got it. But yeah, just continues the quest of getting Sharon the Wanderer games. The goal is to get at least one release from both the North American releases and the Japan releases. So we're making our way there, even if I've never actually played this roguelike series. Next system we're going to talk about is in the same console generation as the Vita, but I think just a tad more prevalent than the Vita. So the first game we're going to talk about for the 3DS is Chibi Robo Ziplash. So from another random seller that I got, which also sold me the last game I'm going to show in this episode. But this is a 2015 side-scroller that's 5th in the Chibi Robo series, and you play as little Chibi Robo as he defends the Earth's resources from aliens. Classic Chibi Robo, obviously. Unfortunately, Chibi Robo is this long-forgotten and unloved Nintendo franchise that just never really took off here. A little more popular in Japan, but here in the US, one game I think was exclusively released in GameStop very early. I think it was the GameCube Chibi Robo, the original one, that just did not sell well, and of course that game is now super expensive. And another game in the Chibi Robo series was exclusively released in Walmart, so I don't know how you expect a big Nintendo franchise to take off when the game is only to be released in Walmart. Kind of sad, kind of neat little piece of Nintendo history, but Ziplash. So that's that. I think there's only one or two North American Chibi Robo games that I'm missing, but yeah, that would be something if this series ever came back on Switch, or perhaps on the Switch's successor. So the next 3 games all came from the same seller. Got a good deal on all 3. And yeah, the first one is Farming Simulator 14, and I don't know what you want me to tell you. It's a farming simulator in 2014. But if I can give you any piece of information, there was also a Farming Simulator 18 released physically on the 3DS. So I got Farming Simulator 14, now I just gotta find 18. Next up is kind of a weird release history here, especially when you consider its original game. This is Finding Nemo Escape to the Big Blue, the Special Edition. So this game was originally released on the DS in 2006, which is a lot like the GBA game that was released that I think we have talked about before. Basically, the GBA release is kind of like the ending cutscene to Finding Nemo, where the members of the tank in the dentist's office are trying to make it to the ocean, and that's kind of where the GBA game picks off. It's also where the DS game picks up from, with with some added gameplay. But this one is the 3DS version of it that we'll talk about in just a second. But this game, you unlock mini games as you get each character back to the ocean, and you gain currency to customize like your ocean base, which is kind of cool. I think that's the added functionality from the GBA game. But now this special edition, released specifically in 2012, just has movie cutscenes as opposed to the silent cutscenes when things happen. So kind of 3 of the exact same game released across 3 different generations of Nintendo handhelds, which is kind of funny. But also, it's Disney. I love Finding Nemo. Finding Nemo is probably the earliest memory I have of going to the movie theater, so that's pretty cool to me. But Finding Nemo on 3DS. Last one from this specific seller is a game we talked about, I think, back in September. Basically, when I changed jobs, decided to get a bunch of games that I hadn't had never seen before, and one of them was Funky Barn on the Wii U. So naturally, we have Funky Barn 3D on the 3DS. So much like its Wii U counterpart, this is a 2012 farm sim that was popularized at the time by like Harvest Moon Games, Story of Seasons games, and it has 2 modes. A story mode where you just start from scratch, and a challenge mode where you fix very damaged farms, so you have 2 options there. There's only 2 Funky Barn games, so now I have both of them, the Wii U and the 3DS. So with the revival of farm sim games, right, like the one Nintendo Direct that had a ton of farm sim games, maybe we see Funky Barn again in the future, but at least for now I got a really cool titled series. I got both of the games in the series. 2 more 3DS games, again from the same seller. So I went to TooManyGames, but this seller was Retro Game Con. So Retro Game Con is another big video game convention that is expanding their program this October. They're going to add more hall space. They're going to add another day of festivities. So definitely check out Retro Game Con. The guys that run it are really, really cool. And I look forward to Retro Game Con because that's also a really, really good convention, if a little bit smaller than Too Many Games. But the guys at Retro Game Con were running a table, 1, to advertise, and 2, to sell some stuff. So the first one is one that I definitely should have had, or I would assume is a must-have in terms of collecting 3DS. Super Mario Maker 3DS. It's a 2015 platformer and Mario level creator. The first game was originally on Wii U, but then it was brought to 3DS to be able to do it handheld. And I don't know what else you want me to say. It's a Mario level creator. I remember like 10, 15 years ago at this point, finding like a Flash Mario level creator and having so much fun with that, making like ridiculous levels. So that's pretty cool. Not so much on the 3DS version as the Wii U version, but in Super Mario Maker 1, just very recently, since the Wii U eShop closed, a project called Team 0% aimed to clear all the Wii U levels. And there's a little drama there at the end, but they were able to complete all the legitimate custom levels in Super Mario Maker for Wii U, which is really, really impressive. And then there's also Super Mario Maker 2 on the Switch. So definitely a cool series if you're into creating your own levels. I don't know if it's so much of an interest now, but maybe at some point I'll get back to it. I'm sure at some point we'll get a Super Mario Maker 3. But the second game in the series, and a must-have for collecting 3DS, obviously. Next one is one I definitely should have, just because you've seen me talk about anything before. You'll understand. This is Donkey Kong Country Returns 3D. So it was originally released on the Wii. Donkey Kong Country Returns on the Wii in 2010, and it returned to like the side-scrolling platformers of Donkey Kong Country games from the Super Nintendo. And it's the first Donkey Kong Country not developed by Rare. So the original 3 on the Super Nintendo were released by Rare. The 3 ports, I guess I should say, on the Game Boy Advance were done by Rare. But I'm pretty sure they were done by Rare. Yeah, they were done by Rare. I remember playing it on my Game Boy Advance. But this was the first one not developed by Rare because in 2002, Microsoft purchased Rare. So Rare does not make Donkey Kong games anymore since it's a Nintendo franchise. So it's instead developed by Retro Studios, who is well known for doing Metroid Prime, for example. So that's a big deal, of course, that it's the first non-Rare Donkey Kong Country. But it was then ported to the 3DS with difficulty improvements, which is always pretty cool. And then there was a sequel on Wii U and Switch, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, which is a big deal. But also, Donkey Kong Country Returns is now again being ported to Switch, Donkey Kong Country Returns HD, but I think I read that it's going to be $60 for a port of a Wii game. So as much as I like Donkey Kong, I don't know if I can justify spending $60 on a Wii game. At least on the Switch, it should not be $60. But at least I got the ported version on 3DS. I got the Wii version back there somewhere. I think I also have it in Japanese, now that I think about it. But yeah, monkeys, Donkey Kong, love it. So, only a handful more systems to go. Next one, we're going to move all the way back to the GameCube, so nothing between GameCube and 3DS. And you could even argue this is not so much a GameCube game. This is the GameCube preview disc that I got from Holy Grail Games, just another vendor at TooManyGames. And it's a demo disc that was bundled with some GameCubes in 2003, and it's got a whole bunch of stuff, actually. A lot of stuff packed onto this little disc. So it's got some playable demos, most namely Sonic Adventure DX Director's Cut, Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell, Beautiful Joe, Billy Hatcher and the Giant Egg, it's Soul Calibur 2. It's also got videos for upcoming games like F-Zero GX, upcoming for the time, F-Zero GX, Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, Star Wars Rebel Strike, NCAA Football 2004, and Madden 2004. But it also, which is very interesting, had some Game Boy Advance downloads. So if you connect your Game Boy Advance to your GameCube, you could download some games to your GBA, which I think obviously had to be connected to the GameCube because GBA can't run on its own without a cartridge. But the two games that you could download were WarioWare Inc., Mega Micro Games, which was a GBA game, and also Dr. Mario, which I think was released as a classic NES series game, if I'm not mistaken. So a lot to do in this one tiny little disc, which is pretty cool. Cool piece of GameCube history to get. And yeah, pretty cool. Next up, 2 games on the N64, both of which are in Japanese, so not including a handful of Switch games. The only 2 Japanese games in this episode, and they're kind of interesting ones. Very, very strange histories behind them. The first one is Cho Snowboard Kids, or just Snowboard Kids 2. This also came from Retro Game Con, the same table, but this is a 1999 sequel to Snowboard Kids, if you couldn't figure that one out. And it's a snowboarding game, pretty much like Mario Kart if you were playing on a snowboard. There's a story mode with battle races and skill modes. There's an expert mode that you can unlock after beating story mode. And it makes me realize that like racing in all forms was like very predominant on the Nintendo 64. Like there was Mario Kart 64, there was Diddy Kong Racing, to name a few. So these very popular series getting one or multiple racing games on N64. Penny Racers is another one that comes to mind, I think. I think we've talked about that one here, actually. Yeah, in the Japanese series. So, kind of an interesting one. Not Snowboard Kids 1, but Snowboard Kids 2, which is way more obscure than Snowboard Kids 1. Pretty cool. And last but not least for the N64 is a very, very weird one, but one that should definitely have way more recognition than it should. This is Saikyo Haboshogi, and it's from Goodiez, which is another vendor at TooManyGames. But even if you've never heard of this game, besides the fact that there's this guy on the front who we'll talk about in just a sec, this game is one of 3 Nintendo 64 launch titles in Japan. The other 2 were Super Mario 64 and Pilot Wings 64, so you could get pretty far with just those 2 games for like a month on your Nintendo 64. But the worst selling of the 3 was this shogi game. So shogi is Japanese chess, as it's called, Japanese chess. And on the cover, or on the front, I should say, is Yoshiharu Habu, who is like a shogi legend. So I don't know how this game is a launch title for the N64, but nobody talks about it. Kind of funny that the artwork has the guy on it, just staring into your soul, wanting to play shogi. So kind of funny, kind of weird little history behind it for being so obscure. And yeah, now I think I have all 3 Nintendo 64 launch titles. At least not all in Japanese. I think I have Super Mario 64 in English, but I don't... No, I do have it in Japanese. Yeah. Cool, look at me. It's like I'm a Japanese kid when the Nintendo 64 launched. I don't know. But the last one is a game I've been looking for a long time. It works in terms of our chronology, right? We jump all the way back to N64. And this last one is on the Super Nintendo. So from the same seller that I got Chibi Robo Ziplash from is Rock and Roll Racing. Let me explain here. So this game is a 1993 combat racing game that I have been looking for forever. It's not an expensive game, but it's been really, really hard to find for no reason. I don't think I've seen it in a single retro store since the time I've discovered it to the time that I bought it. There was like 5 copies at TooManyGames. This was the best priced one, and I got a deal on it with Chibi Robo Ziplash. But I originally saw this game in the Blizzard Arcade Collection from like some ad in 2021 with 2 other games, Lost Vikings 2, and I forgot what the other one was. But I was like, hey, that's pretty cool. It looks like a kind of an interesting racing game. It's isometric, and it's combat racing, like I said. So I just decided to look for the original thing, but I didn't realize it would be this hard to find. Like I said, not super expensive, but kind of weird that I just couldn't come across it anyway. The game rewards attacking other vehicles, right? That's the combat part. And it's a racing game because you play through different divisions of racing, and you can upgrade your vehicle as you go. So multiple divisions, multiple leagues, and yeah, you're just racing. That's it. Another big hallmark to this game is that it has a lot of very popular music from the time. So just to name a few, it's got Bad to the Bone, Highway Star, Born to be Wild, amongst other songs from that era. But one thing that stuck out to me in a little bit of research is I'm a huge Rush fan. So in the definitive edition that was released on Switch and other modern platforms is that Red Barchetta, which is a Rush song. It's actually my dad's favorite Rush song of all time. So that stuck out to me a little bit. So it makes me think that I actually have to go and get the definitive edition, the updated collection. So finally got my hands on this one. It was reasonably priced. So for an obscure Super Nintendo game, I'm glad I was finally able to get it. So that covers everything for this first episode of Too Many Games. Like I said, we'll do episode 2 in the next week, where we're going to talk about one specific seller. But until then, hope you learned something about this set of games specifically. And if there's anything I missed talking about these games, I tried to be really quick with my research because I wanted to get at least this video out soon after Too Many Games. But if there's anything I missed, please let me know. I want to learn about these games as much as I have hopefully taught you something about them. So, with that said, bye!